Richards Bay on South Africa's Zululand coastline has long been associated with the ocean, so it was the perfect place to host the 2009 IODA African Optimist Sailing Championships.
It's a great privilege to be able to hold it. From South Africa's perspective, every year a different country holds it within the African continent. It's Africa's turn this year. From a Richards Bay perspective, it's extremely important for us because it's our opportunity to highlight what we believe is a premier sailing event in the world, a premier sailing venue in the world, and obviously we're very proud of it.
Before any sailing could begin, the important task of measuring took place. Every boat had to go through the process. Measurement staff and helpers were kept busy at each specific station where everything from the positioning of hinges through to the length of the rudder handle were meticulously checked. Dagger boards had to comply with regulation width before passing the inspection.
Good.
The event was held under strict sailing rules and every detail had to be checked and approved according to international competition specifications. Each sail was checked for correctness of signage, all of which was vital to ensure the judges would be able to easily identify each boat on the water. This procedure not only ensures safety of each competitor, who would be sailing in open ocean conditions, but also makes sure no competitor has any kind of technical advantage over the others, ensuring a fair competition based on the sailor's ability and skill at sea.
Okay, what's your sail number, Jacqueline?
10.
Even though there were a few slight problems with the occasional piece of equipment, the experienced officials were able to communicate any minor discrepancies. Once each piece of equipment had been checked, even the boats themselves had a final weigh-in to see that it too conformed to weight regulations.
Double nine. Oh no, but whose boat? Angola? 35.50.
Each one was then signed off and cleared for sailing.
G1.
Once released, the boats were handed over to the sailors to be carefully rigged in anticipation of getting out into the unfamiliar waves. Andreas Giovannini, the South African coach, gave us his thoughts on the upcoming competition and explained the importance of this African regatta to the sailors.
There's a couple of countries that put a lot of emphasis on this regatta. Angola and Algeria are two very good teams, and Mauritius, they're fantastic competitors. They really train hard for this event, and it's a big goal for their sailing calendar. For us, this is we send our top team to the World Championships, and this is not really our B team, but guys who aren't quite ready just to get international experience before they go overseas to the World Champs or some of the big European events.
Day one saw the fleet head out 2.3 nautical miles offshore to get racing underway amidst great anticipation from all the sailors as a strong northeasterly wind averaging 14 knots greeted them. South Africa's Cara Stubbs headed out with the rest of the fleet on the first beat, battling a choppy sea which really tested these young sailors' ability. The fleet spread out and put their skill to the test as they worked hard to reach the first marker buoy. Australia's female competitor, Millie Bennett, rounded the buoy first to head on up the reach ahead of the pack. Millie was closely followed by her fellow Australian teammate James Oliver, who had two African sailors close on his stern. Algeria's Zakaria Khaled rounded the buoy in third. Alex Lettinen chased in fourth position, closely followed by Algeria and Denis Pierre of Mauritius. As the sailors took advantage of the wind in their sails, the rest of the pack tried desperately to make up some time on the front runners. In the end, it was James Oliver who pipped his teammate Millie Bennett at the finish for an Australian 1-2, with Algeria's Zakaria Khaled taking third place, closely followed by SA's Alex Lettinen in fourth. Between races, a short rest period gave some of the sailors a chance to regroup and get some quick repairs done alongside their coach boat. Others took time before the next race to quench their thirst. Grab a quick snack, and even try to have a quick power snooze despite the choppy conditions. Race 2 got underway with a few sailors getting ahead of themselves and the rest of the pack at the start. Angola's Marco Torres took his compulsory turn for being over the start line and then had to tack hard to catch up with the rest of the fleet. The testing conditions meant every sailor had to really work their boats along the first beat. Algeria's female entrant, Imini Sarawi, had a great beat and rounded the buoy ahead of the rest of the pack. South Africa's Alex Lettinen chased her down as they turned into the reach. Once the majority of sailors hit the run, it was time for some speedy bailing and hard tacking to take full advantage of having the wind behind them so they could pick up the pace in an effort to catch up with the leaders. At the gate, going into the final beat of the race, Australia's James Oliver had taken over first place position. South Africa's Matthew Gochran narrowly missed the Kenyan boat of Stan Noakes in his determination to get ahead. The hooter signalled for the second time that the boat of Australia's James Oliver had crossed the finish first, giving him 2 wins out of 2 races. Although Millie Bennett crossed the line in second, she was later disqualified by the judges for jumping the start, giving Alex Lettinen a valuable second place. With winds of 24 knots and 3-meter swells offshore, it was decided to hold the inshore team racing event a day early. The teams took to the water to compete in a 36-race round-robin event. One of the first battles was between Angola and Mauritius. The young sailors showed incredible tenacity, using their sailing skills to get the best advantage of each reach and run. The mass of crisscrossing sails on the course added to the excitement as teams vied for the best position to outwit their opponents around each buoy. Team tactics played a huge part as individual team members marked the opposing team's boats. Each individual sailor battling against the other to slow down the opposing team's progress in order to give their own teammates the advantage of a free run to the finish. As the final day arrived, the sailors converged on the launch area to ready their dinghies and prepare themselves one last time. Despite a tough week of sailing already under their belts, these young sailors looked no worse for wear nor any less eager as they went through their daily warm-up preparations for what was to be a glorious day. Once the boats were checked and readied, it was the turn of the sailors to kit up. While some of the sailors busily rigged and double-checked their boats, the Mauritians took some extra time to release those final day jitters and loosen up sore muscles after such a grueling week. Whilst the Tanzanians were full of high spirits in anticipation of a great day. A short push down to the water's edge and the Oppies were carefully launched. The excitement and nervous tension mounted as each sailor boarded their boats and then waited, as always, for the rest of the fleet to gather. A final safety check to make sure everything was working correctly kept the minds of the sailors on the task ahead. Then the fleet was ready to set sail out of the harbour and into the testing Indian Ocean elements one more time. The conditions had changed drastically overnight. The moderate northerly wind of just 8 knots and a much calmer 1.2 meter swell now favored the smaller competitors, who found it much easier to skim across the water as they took advantage of lighter winds. Tarek Nielsen was looking good for another placing as he rounded the first buoy. The judge boat, as always, positioned itself to check that each sailor passed around the buoy without interfering with any of the other sailors. As the fleet headed along the reach, it was obvious that tactics would play a great part in this day's racing, as the competitors tacked and looked for the best wind to carry them through the course. It certainly wasn't easy sailing, as Algeria's Imini Sarawi discovered after capsizing her boat. As her fellow competitors sailed past, her frustrations were clear as she desperately bailed water as fast as she could to get back into the race. The conditions were exhausting, and while some seemed to be taking a leisurely cruise, Imini was not about to let her dunking get the better of her. Meanwhile, in the middle of the fleet, the previous day's top sailors were also finding these conditions tough. South African Alex Lettinen rounded the second buoy, surrounded by Imini's fellow teammates Laria Hamish and Bilal Nejari, whilst Australia's Millie Bennett sneaked up on their tails. Despite a slight error which almost caused him to capsize in the final beat towards the finish, Tarek kept his cool and managed to stay ahead of the rest of the fleet. And it turned out to be Tarek Nielsen's day. A first over the finish line, and a result that certainly gave Tanzania good reason to celebrate. The overall winner of the IODA Optimist African Championship was James Oliver of Australia. In second, Algeria's Zakaria Khaled, and third place went to South African Alex Lettinen. The African boys' results gave top honours to Zakaria Khaled of Algeria, with Alex Lettinen second and Tarek Nielsen third. The top female sailor overall was Australia's Millie Bennett, second Imini Sarawi of Algeria, and in third position was Heidi Berger of South Africa. The top African female title went to Imini Sarawi of Algeria, with Heidi Berger and Cara Stubbs, both of South Africa, taking second and third respectively. In the team event, South Africa's first team won, with Angola second and Algeria third.